Hey everyone, welcome to Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast. This podcast is all about farmers markets. Whether you're a farmers market manager or a small farmer, food maker, or artisan selling at farmers markets, you have found just the right podcast.
I'm Cat Fields-Waite.
And I'm Bridget Myers. We're longtime farmers market managers, educators, and consultants. Get ready to catch up on all things farmers market pros with us. We're exploring ways to keep farms front and center at farmers markets, and today we're talking with Peter Henry of 10x10 Logistics about helping farmers get their crops to market.
Today's episode of Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast, is supported by Farmers Market University, offering a self-paced online Market Management 101 course for new market managers year-round, and live market management certification classes annually. Learn all the skills you need to manage a new market or improve your current market's operations and reduce your stress. Tent Talk listeners can take advantage of $25 off by using the code FMPROS25 when registering for the next live online Market Manager certification class that starts in January 2025 and runs for 12 weeks. For more information, click the Farmers Market University logo on the resource page at farmersmarketpros.com.
All right, everyone. Well, welcome back to Tent Talk. At Intense 2025, the National Farmers Market Conference, one of the topics we'll be taking a deep dive into is increasing the number of farmers selling at farmers markets. Today, we're chatting with Peter Henry, the founder and owner of 10x10 Logistics. Peter's company supports local farmers with the transportation and sales staff to operate at New York City farmers markets. Welcome to Tent Talk, Peter.
Hi, how's it going?
Hello.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course.
Thanks for being here.
So nice to chat with you again.
We met Peter at the conference earlier this year.
Yes. Conference
Hopefully
bud.
we'll see him again in 2025.
Yeah, that's the plan. I mean, I'm hoping to.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, I love it. All right. Well, for those of you who didn't get to meet at the conference or who don't know you, want to give us a little personal background and tell us who you are.
Yeah. Sure. So I live in New York City. I'm from Pittsburgh originally. I've been here since I finished college in 2009, and it was the middle of the financial crisis, but I was also a English major. It's not as if I can entirely blame the financial crisis on job prospects. I moved to Pittsburgh, actually I moved to New York City just outside of the city with four other guys that I went to high school with who I was in a band with. And we all just kind of tried to get shows in the city, tried to record, tried to play around. I play saxophone. And so because I was in the music industry, that meant that I depended on restaurant work for jobs. And so I worked in restaurants. I kind of worked my way up. I ended up working at Blue Hill in the West Village for about 3 years, which was great. To me, restaurant work was just a job, and that's kind of what introduced me to the farming side of it. But in an interesting way, not necessarily, their big thing wasn't just like, oh, here's the name of the farm on the menu. It's kind of making it a little more interesting than that, or kind of doing something with that relationship with a farmer. And that element of storytelling that we got to do with tables, not just saying, oh, hey, this came from this farm, this is local, or this is rather saying, hey, this is why this farm grows this particular thing. This is why this thing is a part of our menu. That was a really helpful lesson that I learned. I went on to work for one of their purveyors, which is a cheesemaker called Consider Bardwell, and I ran their farmers markets in the city. And that kind of storytelling was really an asset in being a salesperson for that farm. And so, yeah, I went from working nights to working very, very early mornings, getting the cheese down from Vermont, and then loading up the van, packing for markets, and driving, doing the 13-hour driving and dropping and working a market shift Friday through Monday for a while. Anyways, do you want to, I guess, where that grew into 10x10, where by 2019, there was one other farm that I was working with up in Vermont that wanted to get into the markets. They were close to Consider Bardwell, but they were new, they were smaller, and it didn't quite make sense for them to come all the way down to New York City just to work the market themselves. It's a 4.5-hour drive. So they kind of piggybacked on the existing Consider Bardwell logistics. There was already a pallet going down for cheese and wholesale orders. So they put a couple cases of salami on there, and I helped them run the market. So instead of them having to, find someone to babysit and come all the way down and work a market in New York City, they were able to have me represent the farm. And then I was able to find other people to represent the farm as well, at other markets.
So did the salami and the cheese end up in the same booth, Peter, or were you running two booths?
They occasionally, but that's kind of a weird loop. Primarily, we're operating two booths.
Got it.
And that's kind of out of the nature of markets. You guys know that it's everyone likes one unified stand to have kind of one coherent identity. And beyond that, Grow NYC, which is the operator of the bulk of the larger markets in New York City, um, does require, they're a producer only market. And so they have pretty strict requirements around who's allowed to attend and then what's allowed to be sold at any one stand. They have some loopholes called a request to purchase program, where if a product is not represented at a market, you can request to purchase it from another farm as long as you display signage saying that you've done so. And then you can sell someone else's branded product or unbranded product at your stand. And that was another advantage of working with Consider Bardwell, or just kind of multiple producers being under one canopy, was that there were markets that weren't necessarily good enough for a artisanal salami producer to attend, but where you could probably pick up a good 15, 20 sales. So that relationship allowed Consider Bardwell to get a little margin on those sales. It allowed the Walnut Hill farm, the salami producer, to get a couple more sales they wouldn't have gotten, and it got the market to get a couple, another product that it otherwise wouldn't necessarily be able to support.
Interesting.
Yeah, lots of benefits to that. So that's good that they have a system for that and that you could bring that in there. So that's kind of how you got into the business of being at a market with other folks, other farms' items. So then tell us how,
Yeah.
so that just segue straight into you developing 10 by 10 logistics. How did that come about?
More or less. Consider Bardwell had a food safety issue, and so they had to pull out of the markets and have since folded.
Oh,
So I had, yeah, I know it was a bummer of it's a hell of a manage, but anyways, but I was working with Walnut Hill, and I brought on another producer, a honey producer, in a similar boat. They were 4 hours out of the city, and they needed help with day of market transportation and with running, staffing, inventory, all the little logistics. But what I saw that led from those two clients to 10 by 10, which is now 13 clients, is that role, that responsibility of a manager and centralized storage and receiving and transportation. Like, it scales up really well. So there, I just saw that basically, like, to run a couple market stands in a day, if you have to do, so that's kind of the nature of farmers markets in New York City, especially in a dense place where you can't put all your eggs in one basket. You can't be one farm that expects a market to make you all of the revenue you need for the week on one day of the week at one location. And, if it rains, if there's construction on the same block and that wipes out your entire revenue for the week, it's not a sustainable model, and I kind of got towards this idea that, like, sustainability of business model is as important as sustainability of any other agricultural practice in the farm. And that you can't have these farms where it's all dependent on one person at one location. And that's the tricky needle to thread with what we do. I think, for example, Walnut Hill Farm, you can only make so much selling salami in one stand if you have 5 varieties. So they work a market on Saturdays. They work the Troy Farmers Market, which is much closer to them. And then we run 4 market stands per week in New York City for them. And that way, if one market gets rained out, or if if one day gets rained out, they also have the Sunday markets. Or if there's just a slower day at one of the markets, or one of the regular workers is off, they haven't lost 100% of their revenue there. They've kind of diversified within the farmers market system. So anyway, the relationship with the two farms, I guess I saw that there's a benefit to, it's important to have one person who's keeping track of all the information, doing all the reporting, and then also finding good people to work the markets. As that market grows, it kind of benefits from having more people involved. So I was able to find someone who's a great market worker who's working for a salami stand Saturday, but the honey producer needed somebody on Sunday. I was able to cross train them. And that skill is, I mean, I believe like it's a part of farming. It's kind of like the last fermentation process of salami into money. It's, and that's the thing that we run up into against, which we can get into later. But anyway, so there were a lot of just benefits of this scale of working together. If we had one truck going to a market, it was able to drop 3 pallets with 3 producers, product, equipment, bank, tablet, square reader, everything they needed to work the market so that a producer, the market worker would show up, set up, have their day. Then at the end of the day, pack up, do the online form that I make, and send it all back to the warehouse.
Are you the employer of the team members, or are they employed by the individual farms?
No, so they are employed by the individual farms. And
Okay.
that's the distinction that is kind of, I think, I haven't really toyed with that, but I think I don't want to employ everybody.
I'm with you there.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a headache, but it's also just, it's against this kind of spirit of the markets in that every stand there is operating under the banner of that farm. So Finger Lakes Beekeeping, Walnut Hill, they're all there under that banner. They have their own relationship with the market operators. I'm just kind of the facilitator, really. In a way, we're just advanced carpooling.
Mhm.
And that is what we do we do just carpooling, just transportation for a bunch of producers.
Oh,
yeah.
And that I would love to do more of it, to be honest, because that's very easy. For example, a baker out of Philadelphia, Lost Bread Co. They're incredible. They do New York City green markets. They used to have a driver drive 2 hours into New York City, stick around for the entire, 6 to 10 hour market day, and then drive all the way back, just with a van full of gear and empty bins. So now what we do is we just handle their gear and their empty bins. So we deliver all their equipment to a market. We at the end of the day, we'll pick up the equipment and whatever bins were left over, we'll bring the leftover bins from another market. So that way that turns their driver's job from a 13-hour day into a 4-hour round trip. They can drive up, drop off the product, help out, check, restock bags or something in the kit, and then turn around, go back, and they still have time to do wholesale deliveries in New York City or in Philadelphia.
And meanwhile, there's an employee of theirs that lives in New York that's not making that trek, right? Is that how that's
Correct,
happening?
Yeah. There's a city-based market worker for them that takes care of that.
Got it.
And I want to start doing this with veg farmers as well eventually. I mean, it doesn't make sense for me to drive day of up to a farm, pick up all the product and come down. Most of our other producers, they bring the product down over the week because it's more dense, relatively stable, refrigerated or shelf stable stuff. Salami, frozen meat, honey, maple syrup, aged cheese. But with a veg farmer, I could just handle their gear, empty bins, and maybe like end of day cash, basically. But Joe, it's just something where the whole drive, because that's the hardest thing of a market in New York City is that day for a farmer. And it's just unsustainable. There are so many things where I just think like the farmer shouldn't have to have their entire business model depend on them just breaking their backs to work a crazy hours, get up at 2 and get home at 5 or 7. So yeah, that's kind of, I'd like to move in that direction eventually.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I was curious about that. I was wondering if you handled fresh veg or if you're doing when you're talking about putting something into storage or whatever. So you're mostly handling things that are semi shelf stable, or at least have a reasonably long shelf life.
Yeah, again, relatively compact display setups. I don't, almost all the producers, I think all the producers we work with right now have a single 10x10 or 5x5 setup for everything. And it's almost entirely able to fit on a single pallet. The idea really came out of palletizing. Like I wish I'd read the book about shipping containers earlier, and I would have thought of this earlier, but it was actually just because like I was tired of driving the van and I'd have 3 markets to drop off for, and I'd get to my last one and I'd realize I forgot the weights at the first one.
Yeah.
And that I had to drive back, but also just it's killing your back. You're loading and unloading an entire cargo van full of heavy, awkward stuff. Like this is what you usually get like a couple friends over to help you move to do and pay them in pizza. And this is something that we were doing like 4 days a week in a row. Um, and it just wasn't efficient. And I saw like, I thought of a way that we could containerize it. And I thought that, well, all right, so we make the kits per market as compact as possible and then just palletize it. So the hard choices for packing, for remembering what goes in this market versus what goes to this market, all those are made the day before or 2 days before at our warehouse when we have time, when we have a checklist, when we have somebody whose job isn't to drive and also work that market, but is just to pack that pallet. Um, because, it's all the things you remembered don't matter if it's versus the one thing that you
Yeah,
forget.
exactly. So your team are like the drivers and the folks in the warehouse. Those are your employees.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So my employees are the warehouse team that, and actually not even the driving team. That's another thing that, we don't own any vehicles right now. And that's because owning and insuring and operating a vehicle in New York City is its own job,
Mhm.
is its own business, really. And I knew that from the get-go. This is a weekend heavy business where so much of our business is Saturdays and Sundays. Right now, every Saturday we have three 26-foot trucks. Sunday we have two 26-foot trucks, completely full, but we have maybe half a truck full any other day of the week. So I couldn't own and store all of those and insure all of those. It's chaos. I mean, insuring a cargo van is like $1,500 a month in New York City. Parking it is $400 a month.
Yikes.
Um, so I found an owner operator. I knew that there were
Okay.
folks who basically um, own a van, insure it, or own a truck. And there are always gigs around the city to pick up for this type of work. And I figured I'd find somebody who would be able to help me out on the weekends because they were filling out their schedule doing normal Monday to Friday stuff for the rest of the week. Um, and I found somebody tremendous, somebody incredible. It was like the peak of COVID. We started this in 2019.
Great timing.
I found David and Aaron, his son Aaron, drivers during the middle of the peak of COVID, really, and couldn't have been luckier. Couldn't have found nicer folks. And it could have been so many more headaches, but it's turned into like a wonderful working relationship. So basically, like he owns a van, he owns a truck, and he finds or leases other trucks and brings on drivers for them. And I just try to make it as consistent and communicate our needs as clearly as possible. I print out a route sheet every week. We know where the exact locations are at each market. Um, we communicate ahead of time with the market organizers so that we know where any changes are happening if it's a market that we're getting to before the managers are there. Because that's another crazy. The crunch times of driving are crazy because we will have we'll have a truck that might hit 5 different markets on a Saturday, all of them starting at 8 a.m. So we have to start. I mean, the warehouse shift starts at 4 a.m. with pulling all the pallets and lining them up and having them ready to go and load up onto the truck. And then it all gets loaded. So our first pallets can drop at 5:30 in the morning. And we have to make sure we get it in the right spot because otherwise, someone loading with a cargo van is going to have a big pallet in the middle of their market spot, which does still happen.
You're
But
using like trucks with lift gates that are
yes,
able
yeah,
to
we're using
drop a pallet.
yeah, 26-foot box truck with a lift gate is kind of the standard vehicle, and that's kind of as big as you can get without needing a CDL license in the city, and which I don't think are illegal anyways.
This is fascinating to me. I love this. So
Are you thinking about all your vendors that arrive
Please.
and they've dropped a couple places and don't have their weights? Because that rang a bell with me.
Yes, I would like
Oh, yeah.
all of the vendors to have all their equipment all the time. I'd also we're on site at 4:30, and there are a couple farmers that get there before us. I'm like, do you guys get here at 3 o'clock? I've never beat them
Oh.
to the street, so they're there early. But then
Yeah.
mostly people are coming between 6:30 and 7. Like everybody is coming at the same time, and it's a
Mhm.
little chaotic sometimes. So it'd be nice if we could get some pallets dropped off. Just for feeling
Yeah.
as a market operator, I feel like that sounds like a better logistic situation. So,
Sure.
yeah, it sounds like, I mean, this is great. So what geographic area are you guys? Are you only going to New York City? Like what you guys are picking up close by? Yeah.
So right now, and just to your point about how it being easier for an operator, that's everything about this is about finding some economies of scale that aren't accessible to normal small producers.
Mhm.
And I think like I've always thought about the fact somebody told me once, when you think you're benefiting by shopping locally, you have to remember that a market that's served by, 26 pickup trucks driving from the same town into 20 to one market for a pickup truck for every stand, like there's a lot of waste there. There's a lot of inefficiency there. So it's kind of like trying to borrow lessons from food hubs and from distribution to make it make a little more sense. And it's in turn been easier for the organizers. Now the organizers, the market managers with Grow NYC know us, and they know that they can work with one person for 3 producers, and they don't have to find parking for that producer
Mhm.
for any of them. But yeah, so we serve, our efficiency is kind of the market locations within the city, not the farm locations. So we started off only doing New York City, and I started reaching out to the producers that had compatible products at similar markets. So on Saturday, we'll hit Grand Army Plaza, McCarran Park, Fort Greene. These names don't mean anyone not from New York City, but
I get them.
but we'll hit as many
Yeah.
producers at those markets as we can. So I just started working with Hudson Valley Duck lately, and that's been great because duck is relatively dense. It fits, you can get 2 coolers for all your product you need for a stand. And they were already attending all of the markets we already went to. So it was a matter of just kind of making them work with our inventory process and then finding and staff and making the kits work more efficiently. Um, and then Grow NYC works with producers, I believe, like up to 250 miles outside of the city. They have a map.
Mhm.
We just this year started working in, last year started working in Westchester County. So we work with down to earth markets, Morning Glory markets, and the Pleasantville Farmers Market up there. Um, and that's a whole different scene because that is not a strictly producer only market. And it's different. It's West New York City markets are kind of a beast under themselves. I guess I don't really have a lot of experience outside of them, but um, it's interesting. You don't have as many smaller, much smaller businesses and single person producers because if the point of entry is owning a farm, uh, it's funny how it kind of cuts both ways. Where yeah, it's you protect farmers in that way, but you also set the bar pretty high for what it takes to get into a market like that. Land ownership, and especially land ownership within reasonable like commuting access of New York City.
Mhm.
Do they not,
Um,
does Grow NYC, do they not allow people that are leasing land? Yeah, they have
they
to
do
own
allow
it?
leasing. Yeah, they
Okay,
do
cool.
allow
All right,
leasing.
good,
Yeah.
cool.
But I mean, it's an onerous startup cost,
Right.
and it's a scary. That's why. I mean, the producers Walnut Hill Farm, they're 4.5 hours away, and they're in Vermont, and I don't think it would be a viable business if they were an hour out of the city for either purchasing or leasing the land.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
but I think it's all within the food shed. It's a large enough city that both it can support farms that far away and farms all over the region will get their best dollar selling into these, dense cities, basically. I
Mhm.
think it's great that the farms are able to do local farmers markets as well, but it's about sales is just another farm tool that can work more or less efficiently, like if you can run a market stand, it's like, sales are the gas going into that tractor. Sales are you need to get the best return on your spend and your time doing that to make it an efficient part of your business, same as you would look at any other part of the business.
Yeah, I think that a lot of farmers find that that is the way to go to sell because they can keep that whole dollar when they're at the market. And so even though they have to pay for gas and all those things, it's that they're getting to keep like all of that sales price as opposed to doing something might be easier like a packing house or selling to a store or something like that. So I think the trade-off, but it just depends how the farm is set up. So it sounds like you're kind of you're helping the farms that don't want to manage their own staff and have their own trucks and be driving in and out and stuff. Because I know what
And
we
are
see at
maybe
our-
farther out.
yeah, just like further away. So they drive. I mean, but we
Sure.
have farms that come from
Fresno.
way far. I mean, we
Yeah.
have farms that drive in and they have a team of their own, and it's their own trucks and their own employees and their equipment, things like that. So they manage it themselves. But I know not a lot of farmers either have a desire to do that because what they want to do is farm and focus on the food and not logistics
Right.
planning, or can't figure it out. can't manage it. It's too difficult. They're
Right.
not good employee managers. They're not good, equipment trackers and all those kinds of things. So kind of helping those farms still be able to do direct sales at the market and keep that bottom line. So
Well, and it would make
Yep.
sense actually in a place like California because we legally can only host California farmers.
Mhm.
So where we
Right,
are,
right.
30 minutes from the Mexican border and 4 hours from Arizona, well, less than that to like Yuma. We can't host Arizona farmers. We can't host Mexican farmers, but we can
Huh.
host anybody from anywhere in the state of California. So we have people driving 7 hours from Fresno. So,
Wow.
yeah, which is, and I can imagine that a system like this would make sense. A Smith and, I don't know, we got a few people that are coming from really far North Hopkins.
Yeah.
If they could all combine to this kind of system, it would make some sense.
The carpooling. I like
yeah,
the idea of carpooling.
Advanced
Yeah.
carpooling. Yeah, I like it. Yeah, that
Great.
makes sense.
I know a guy who does Westchester markets, who also does markets all over the East Coast. He does olive oil, John Arlotta olive oil. And he has some markets where it's just operated self-serve by the worker out of a storage locker. Like it's basically, he'll restock the storage locker as needed. The worker will scan out the product they take for market that day, scan it back, whatever they have left over at the end of the day.
Interesting.
So he can have a fully remote operation. I've never been able to work with people who have cars because New York City, nobody owns a car.
Yeah.
So it's always been incumbent upon us to do day of market delivery.
Yeah. Interesting.
What a service. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Nuvo and some of those guys might do that. They're coming from Northern California, but I think they have a storage space here and their staff at the markets in San Diego are doing that kind of thing. They're going in and out of a
olive oil,
space.
olive oil, honey, those things. That's like, yeah.
So Peter, you and I have talked before, and we've always had discussions about how 10 by 10 fits into the definition of farmers markets, which are, recurring events where farmers and producers sell direct to consumers. And that creates a couple of specific outcomes. I think I've got a little better understanding, actually, now that we've talked to you for a few minutes. But one, the farmer keeps the full retail price. They don't get pennies on the dollar like when they're selling to Jimbo's or to Whole Foods or what have you. So on the backside with you, it sounds like you're not buying the produce and reselling it. Well, for one thing, it's suddenly become clear to me that you're mostly not dealing with produce, but
Right, yeah.
you're not buying the products and reselling it. So is the farmer paying you a percentage of their total sales? Is it a consignment thing? But you're saying
a flat fee. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is. So that is an important part of the markets, is that I'm not just a buyer reseller in most of these cases. And I'm trying to do a little more as a kind of consolidated wholesaler for some of the farmers. That's slow growing. It'd be great. Like there are some farms want to sell to restaurants or shops around the area, but people can't come and pick up from market. They can't deliver. So I am interested. And it also takes sales. It takes support, direct to the shop support to actually do that. I would like to do more of that, but it's something we're trying to grow in the future. But yeah, so at all these markets now, so I will handle the cash for them. I'll charge the square readers, but I am just kind of, when we need more staff, I'm going to find people either within my network or outside. If they're a good fit, I'm going to get them trained on the stand. I'm going to introduce them to the farmer, and I'm going to do as much as I can to build that relationship between them and the farm. So yeah, so we charge a per market fee. We'll charge some contribution towards storage, because that's a big premium, having any kind of space in the city, plus electrical. So, if they have 5 SKUs, it's going to be a lot smaller than if they have 50 SKUs that are all heavy and breakable and need to be refrigerated or frozen. And then if I'm involved in managing their stands as well, I typically do either kind of a consulting fee as well, or a percentage of sales, as the kind of compensation for that. And that just helps our goals be tied and aligned. I find I can transport people's product and still do everything I can to help them make successful markets and everything. But if I'm incentivizing staff and driving them to do what they need to do to represent the farm, then I think it works best if we have some kind of incentive in line with the farm.
So when you say if you're managing a stand, you mean I mean, I'm assuming you've got too many people you're dealing with for you to be managing a stand in terms of standing there and talking to the customer.
Oh, no.
But when you say managing a stand, do you mean that you've really kind of wrapped your arms around the staff and you're training them to be able to talk about product and you're identifying ways to improve displays? Or what do you mean when you say managing a stand?
So that's the kind of hardest part of it. And that is the thing that I feel like I did the best at when I was at Consider Bardwell. It took me being a bad manager. It took me having a lot of good managers and a lot of bad managers to kind of get to where I am. But I think that it's tricky because so at Consider Bardwell, I had a time when I was working one stand, but I had 4 other stands operating at the exact same time, starting at the same time. And so I realized that the default mode for a worker was to be able to operate as autonomously as possible. And I had to figure out what it took on the system side and on the communication side to make that effective. So the system side, meaning you can't just throw somebody a disheveled bin that's a mess and hasn't been restocked and don't tell them what they're getting to sell that day and don't give them any communication with the farm and just hope they're going to do well. You have to, quote unquote, set somebody up for success. So a big part of what we do is just making the day easier for people. It's labeling everything in the bins. We have an entire shift where Joseph comes in and he cleans every single bin and he checks every single note that was made from the week prior and make sure they have enough toothpicks and paper towels and all the domes are clean and everything. Then on the support side, it's everything you can do during the week to make somebody ready to go. So it's communicating what they've been packed for a product that week. It's deciding based on what was sold the previous week and when they sold out of what to order from the farm, what to ask the farm to send down that week and what to send to that market. PARs, deciding the PARs for every market is we're watching it per item per market every single week. And then it's just being kind of the moral support as much as needed. And then it's getting coverage. Working markets is a job that demands flexibility. And it's a job that you have to acknowledge you're never going to be almost never going to be a full-time opportunity for people because the bulk of markets are Saturday and Sunday. And there's only so much advancement you can provide to somebody within a company as a market worker, either within 10 by 10 or with one of these farms. And so what I have to offer is as much autonomy, as much the fun of working in a market, as much pay as possible and as much flexibility. And so a big part of my job is just getting coverage for people. This musician has a gig the night before and so they don't want to work the market. This person is sick this week. This person's traveling for this month. And so I guess the management that I would describe that I kind of charge for, it's kind of just like an overseeing responsibility. It's knowing that they send down product and these markets that they attend are going to be attended and going to be as lucrative as possible for that week. And I just look at every little ridiculous detail as possible. In the good weeks, I have enough time to paint signs and, visit markets. On the bad weeks, I'm scrambling around. I'm either working a market myself or I'm driving to markets to bring square readers that they forgot to somebody.
I was going to ask, do you still work a market stand now and again in this situation?
Yes and no. Yeah. I mean, I just had a kid. And so I've worked weekends my entire life. And so, I mean, he's only 5 months. He doesn't, barely knows I'm there half the day, but like, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I love working markets. I love the weekends, but at the same time, I want the flexibility to be able to take some days off, which it's crazy that I have a Saturday off every now and then working in the farmer's market world.
Yeah, like what?
But my wife works a Monday to Friday job. She's an attorney.
You were about to say normal job, weren't you?
Yeah, a normal, exactly. Like a normal human job of,
what's that?
Having a desk. Yeah, exactly.
We don't know.
Which, yeah, I've never known either. And so, yeah, but at the same time, like I said, the model for each of these stands is they should be able to operate without me because that's the default mode. There are some stands that I personally haven't seen that worker in person in months because they have work a Monday to Friday job and they live on the other side of the city from me. Brooklyn is an hour and change away from me most ways I get there. I live in Harlem. And so I really have to kind of build communication channels in a way that works for everybody. And that's been really challenging. I've started making like TikTok length videos lately to train as kind of training videos or kind of product communication. Um, I don't know. Communication within an organization like that is as much a marketing skill, I find.
Sure.
Like you can't, it's just like putting up a bulletin at the market. You can't just put a sign up and say, there, everyone knows it because I put it on the wall. Um, I can't just make a customer or like a worker employee handbook and say, here, now everybody knows everything in this. You have to do the work and meet people halfway to get the information you want them to know and, get it saturated, get it in their heads.
Yeah, a lot of managing people and making it fun for them and making them responsible.
Mhm.
Because you're just, and then also these small farms are dependent on this system working that you have set up so that they can support their farm. So
Well, and I
important
feel
job.
with a lot of small farmers, I mean,
Mhm.
we have some farmers in particular that we see a ton of turnover.
Mhm.
And my sense is that
Mm.
they're busy farming and they're not doing this.
Yeah.
They're not communicating with the staff or watching the staff reports to figure out what the par should be, or something's not selling and something else is selling a lot, but they still keep sending the same load to the market.
Yeah.
So my guess is they're busy farming and they don't have time to do all the HR level and sales training kind of things that it sounds like you're doing. So at any level of farming, they'd be getting better results by having this kind of support.
Yeah, for sure. Do any
Mhm.
farms that you work with like use your service, but then the farmer or like the producer does show up and work in the booth, but they just have you like bring all their stuff for them?
I mean, so once I'm only managing and providing kind of managing staffing right now for, I say only, but now we're doing 5 farms that way,
Mhm.
5 different producers. But the rest of the folks are there. The farm's own staff or the producers themselves will come in and do it. That's one I'm working on right now with the cider producer, where he's doing it himself, but it's just he's got knee problems, he's got back
Mhm.
problems. It's the thing. I don't know. I believe in specializing labor wherever possible, and I think that you're right that farmers aren't necessarily. I get that all the time where people just think like, well, no one's going to sell as well at this stand as I do, and like none of the workers I get are ever reliable, or they never sell as well. I was like, well, I mean, are you spying at them from across the market to see if they display the table right? Are you like making them go into their pocket to pay the $2 short that they are versus the inventory? There is it is a whole different thing. And also some farmers aren't salespeople.
Mhm.
Some business owners aren't salespeople. And like that doesn't mean that business shouldn't exist.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean that farm isn't making incredible product. It just means that the farmer should focus on the thing that they're good at.
Mhm.
And like I said, sales just is another piece of farm equipment. They should invest in it in a certain way as if they wouldn't have to invest in an accountant. And that's kind of that's where we get to the role of the worker at the market. I mean, I want everybody to talk about the business with a like this is where we operate. This is how we this is how we raise the pigs and everything, because they are as much a part of the farm as any other part that's creating value for it.
Yeah.
And we're honest always. I mean, I used to be self-conscious about that when I worked with a cheesemaker, because people would say like, oh, are you the cheesemaker? And like, yeah, I got up at 2 and pulled the cheese out of the oven. And like, no, I don't like, you're not going to farm splain at somebody and tell them like every single thing that goes into making this thing and how doing all of that and coming to market isn't a good idea. You're just going to create a good experience for them. And so instead of having that conversation, we just say like, oh no, I'm based in the city, but I help them run the markets because they're 4 hours away, or because they have a market today, or because they deserve a day off.
And if you can tell their story and you're educated about the product and you can
Yeah.
still, ask the customer questions and things like that, I think that's really the important part about farmers markets is that people can have these conversations with people who have a deep knowledge of the product. It doesn't have to be the person that's making it. That's not really practical. Obviously, we all love that. We have farmers like that are the actual farmers and they come to our markets and it's like we get to ask them about, the soil and their hands are all dirty and stuff. And so it's like that's great. But I also don't mind buying produce from folks who I know are employees of this farm and they pick it up, but they've been to the farm. They know the farmer. They can tell me
Mhm.
about the different varieties of oranges that they have. They have a deep knowledge of it. And to me, that is just as valuable because I'm getting like a really good locally grown product that I feel good about eating. So I think we kind of have to get beyond the like entitlement of always wanting to buy directly from the person that harvested that because it's just, especially in big cities, it's not practical. There's a million of us.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
finding these systems where you're not totally like wholesaling, reselling. I'm not going to a warehouse to pick up, a bucket of apples and just checking myself out at the self counter. It's like we're still getting that farmer's market kind of process.
That conversation and
Mhm.
things. There are, I
Absolutely.
have
Yeah.
seen markets, though, that require the actual producer to be at the market X amount of times during the
Mhm.
year, for instance. In fact, we used to
Sure.
require that the actual farmer be in the stall. I think it was once per quarter.
Yeah, back in
Because
the day.
Bob Polito used to show up every once in a while, but we wouldn't see him every week, but we'd see him off and on.
He still does.
Do you work with any farmers markets that have that rule? And in that case, does the producer show up once in a while?
So Grow NYC technically has a rule like that, a days per month or per quarter requirement that's hasn't been enforced at least in the last 10 years.
Well, now they're going to listen to this podcast and start
Call
enforcing
No,
it.
I mean, it's already been a point of discussion, and there are some farmers that push for it. In my opinion, is what you said is exactly true. That's there has to be an evolution to that,
Mhm.
and that I think when people don't like the idea or are afraid of managing staff or afraid of allowing staff at a market, they have the image of a dude sitting on a cooler looking at his phone all day.
And that happens too.
Yes.
Sure. And that'll happen with the farmer too
Yeah.
sometimes, but it's,
Yep.
it's ideally, yeah, that nobody wants that. But that's kind of my job basically, is just kind of giving people, I always tell I always tell market workers, like, I want you to have a sense of ownership over this, not just as a part of the farm, but this is your stand. Like, if somebody's giving you trouble, you tell them to F off and I have your back.
Mhm.
Like, if you need to tell people, people work at your pace, not at the pace that they think that they get to shop.
Mhm.
Like, the more confidence you kind of exude and can command because that's what people want at the market. They just want someone who, I think customers do like the idea of buying from a producer, but like you said, they like the experience, but they also like buying from somebody who cares about something,
Mhm.
like cares about the product or cares about this interaction with you in this moment.
Mhm.
Service or product. And I think that's important. Yeah, Grow NYC is does talk about doing that, I think, but I think it's, I don't know, it's not a sustainable model. It's not, if you have to be physically present for every single sale, I always say, like, what pays the bills at the farm? Like FAQs or products sold?
Mhm.
And that's the actual nature. I mean, obviously we want to be there and we want to be present, but like if it's a required like once a quarter, then it just becomes kind of like a token appearance. And it's not a petting zoo, it's not a farmer show and tell thing. And often the farmers aren't the best
Mhm.
people to be they don't want to meet a lot of people. That's fine too.
Yeah.
We have some of those.
We have some farmers that are like, they look like they are in a torture chamber when they're at the market. Like, it's like horrible for them to be at the
they
market.
don't like it.
They've told me, we're not city people. I don't want to be here.
We
Like,
had
I'm
Frank-
happy to sell.
We got a guy from an egg ranch that said, my wife or an employee has to go to the market because I just don't like the kind of people that go to farmers
Yeah.
markets.
I mean,
Like,
they
okay,
get
Frank.
bothered by,
Yes, please stay home.
young ladies with their matcha and their Instagram. I mean, like, that's not their vibe. And it's like, sometimes they can be a little gnarly. So like, that's not helping anybody. Let's just get your oranges and your grapefruit are lovely. Let's bring them and have this employee sell that for you. So yeah.
Peter, what's your relationship been with, say, the management and the whole admin of Grow NYC? Like, were they happy about what you were doing? Were they suspicious? Do they even know that you're doing it? I mean,
oh no, they do. Yeah. It's always been interesting because I do operate in kind of a gray area. I'm not a producer, but I'm kind of the representative of the producers.
right.
Yeah.
But did they suspect that you were a reseller? Were they just kind of suspicious of the whole thing? Did you have to get them up to speed?
They never suspected, but I was always pretty clear and upfront. And I just made a point of being as clear. I mean, I knew them well from managing stands, from being that single person for Consider Bardwell.
Mhm.
And I knew that kind of I'm operating in their sphere. They are their markets. they can make a decision tomorrow that would end my business. And so I figured, well, it's I want to insulate myself against that, but I also want to make sure that I'm helping them as much as possible.
Mm.
So I communicate directly with them. The site coordinators or the market managers know to reach out to me if somebody's missing from this stand or something, and it's gone really well. And now actually they are a client of ours. We are delivering the market equipment, the tent table weights, the bins for 9 Grow NYC markets per week at this point.
I was just going to say, can you please bring my info booth supplies to my markets?
Because they have the same issues.
tents,
I mean, like like Marcel Van Owen can't personally be at every single market himself either.
Yeah.
They have market workers who are hired who are based all over the city, and not a lot of them drive, and they don't want a bunch of vehicles. Like I said, it's every vehicle we can take off the road is one less headache and a lot less money for every one of these producers, and that applies to Grow NYC too.
Yeah, absolutely. They have like mega info booths too. I feel like a lot of the markets that I've been to, the Grow NYC, I mean, they sell like the calendars and the merch, and they do all the, I mean, like, that's like a whole system that you have to set up. So that's so helpful for the market operators as well.
Yeah, they have at Union Square, they have a whole branded
like a trailer
truck.
Right?
Yeah, it's like a trailer, and it stays on the plaza overnight. I think. And they just, it's really cool.
And they do like chef demos and stuff. So I don't know. That's just like a lot of equipment
Right.
to have. So that's super useful. Yeah.
But we help with the smaller markets that are everything that can fit on a single pallet, basically.
Right.
Perfect. Yeah.
And then have you ever gotten any pushback from other farmers? I mean, do they think what you're doing is a great idea and they wish they could afford it? Or is it like, dang, that guy's getting off easy. Somebody's doing all his work for him.
Yeah, no. I mean, I used to pick my own fights with farmers, I think, sometimes, because I think also, it's the idea that like everyone should, I don't like the idea that a business should be arbitrarily a certain size. Every small business owner and every small producer basically will call whatever a business is one increment bigger than my business is too big. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I just like I get into fights that I've kept myself out of lately, and it's been advantageous to my health and blood pressure and business as well.
Maturity's kind of cool.
But, yeah, it is. It's nice to kind of come by whenever you finally find it. But like no, I mean, for some producers, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm not really trying to step on any toes lately, and so luckily have not. Some producers, it is hard to kind of make the dollar amount worthwhile, because even that framing of saying you get to keep the entire dollar, like I kind of reject that math too, because I think like you have to do the math of how much you're paying yourself.
Yes.
Sometimes that's what I run into when someone says, well, it's free for me to drive to market. I own the vehicle and it's my time. I'm like, what? Like that's
your time's not free. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like if you do the math that way, then I'm never going to be competitive.
Yeah.
But I think what I try to push to people is that like, even if this isn't for you now, I don't know, this business should exist beyond you. And it doesn't necessarily, that the whole intergenerational issue of farms is that like, if your kids aren't going to take over, what do you do?
Mm-hmm. And
if your business is built around one job that only you choose to do and no one else would ever do if they didn't have the same skills and passion, then it's I mean, that plot of land that can support this incredible product that you're doing isn't going to exist once you can't physically do it anymore.
Yeah.
But if you build in infrastructure and systems that aren't solely dependent on that, then I don't know, at the very least, it has a chance of existing. Somebody who doesn't want to do the exact same crazy shift could still,
Yeah, a little like succession planning. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think just figuring out, cost of goods kind of math happening. Like what is the cost of the time spent doing all the things that you're doing, or can someone just pay you and then they make a better product and you can scale up that way. So yeah, I think it's just, having people come sit down and do that. But this has been very enlightening. I'm like, how can I get you guys out on the West Coast? Are you?
Yeah, no.
I'm like, somebody listening, please start this in California. I would love this.
I'm not doing it.
Come on.
But you can for sure.
When your 5-month-old baby grows up, they can do this.
Of course. Yeah, you can have it all.
Yeah, that's right. Are you so like for the future, are you looking to add any services, or are you just like cruising with the system and it's working well?
This season has been like the best we've ever had, partly because we've just had new producers. We've had the existing producers put on more markets
Hmm.
and do more, we've started working with Westchester markets, and we really haven't expanded too far into Westchester. So there are multiple, we can expand along our own routes. There are more producers we could work with. We could get more trucks. The more that we do without leaving the city, the better.
Hmm.
I tried to do pickup services with some of the producers, but it just logistically didn't make sense. I would work with two producers who all have the same markets, but one is in near Ithaca, one is in Vermont, and there's never going to be an economical way. I'm not a freight broker. I'm not a long haul, so I'm just not going to try to do that.
Yeah, that's kind of the charm of it. It sounds like that you're not getting too big where it feels like some corporate situation. It's like still
Yeah,
feels like, this is still the spirit of the farmers market because you're working kind of small scale within boundaries of that. Yeah. Hmm.
yeah. Well, yeah, I didn't. I mean, I had no money to start this up. I started this up on credit cards, but
Hmm.
like, which is don't do that.
Very
Um,
common, but
but
not necessarily advisable.
Yeah.
right. But I just figured like I don't have the capacity to kind of have all this inventory that I own and buy and pay for. So I just knew I looked at the operating costs when it wasn't my dollar, and I said, all right, well, if I can, this is how much these guys are spending to do all these things right now. If I can do it for that or less, and I can use that as a budget
Hmm.
to then expand that service and fit other people into the same capacity, then yeah, I will.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I was really lucky. I mean, it's also consistent work, I mean, that's my margin is smaller, but it's a farm. I don't have to fight for every single sale. I don't have to be running down phone calls to book somebody for this truck. Like if you do a market and you've committed to this market, you're going to do that market every single week
Yeah.
because your business depends on it. And so we're really codependent, and we're really partners with all the producers we work with.
Yeah.
And if I know if I have amount of certainty of revenue that's going to come in, I don't have to, you know, bake in as much overhead margin to compensate for days when we will be slower.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense of what it costs your farmers or your producers? Like what percentage of?
Yeah, I look at it as a percentage
Uh-huh.
actually. And I think like the healthy number that I like to see is between 35 and 40% of their gross sales is what should be spent on operating costs
And have you
of
calced what, like a comparison to that when you look at what they would pay to just, pay an employee and drive and all that stuff?
yeah, I mean, I've made spreadsheets to show that through to people to sell it to them because that is, yeah, it's hard, like you even said, like it's hard to even figure out your own cost of goods.
Sure.
And that's a tricky math that can change 100 different ways the way, when you decide what overhead is and all that. But in most cases we're saving people money. In some cases we're costing about the same, but it's just a much less of a headache
Yeah.
to operate. It depends.
What's the cost of brain damage? I mean, how to
Yeah,
put a
yeah.
price on that? Reduced brain damage.
Well, that is true too. It's like just the
Stress.
bandwidth. I mean, talking about like boundaries and self-care, like farmers should do that too. We shouldn't, I mean, even if it costs them a little bit, they should be taking care of
Yeah.
themselves so they can like live longer. They're not breaking their back with the tent and I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. If your entire business, if you have, a team of employees that entirely depend on you doing every single thing, like that's not good for them.
Hmm.
It's you want to make something that's grows beyond just what one person. And that's how I run 10 by 10 too. I mean, Edith, Jose, Malcolm, Joseph, David, all like the whole warehouse team are incredible. And I try to cross train as much as possible, because that's the type of restaurants I worked in, everybody on the floor could manage the restaurant that night
Hmm.
too.
Yeah.
And I like specialization to a certain extent, but also, yeah, I want everybody to be able to operate this thing without me, not because I just want to be a passive owner, um, but like because I want it. I don't want to be, that important to it in the long run.
Yeah. Just empowering,
Yeah.
empowering people. Doesn't sound like you're expanding, but like, would you think of developing teams or like training other people to do these businesses in other parts of the country? Or is that like further down?
Yeah, I mean it's tricky. I've thought about that. I thought about that a little more a year ago. I mean, it's there are other cities where it would work for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's not a lot of scale. You kind of the math starts fresh when you have a lease and you have new drivers and new staff there. Like there's not as much kind of shared overhead that benefits. I developed an app based on not, a quote unquote app, like a fancy front end for a spreadsheet. I have like a good, reliable, online form for reporting. I try to make all that stuff like as streamlined as possible. That stuff can scale.
Yeah.
The lessons I've learned, finding what the best tent weight is, which is a kettlebell, and I'll fight about that.
Actually, I
4
agree.
kettlebells in a milk crate.
Yeah.
Yeah. 4 kettlebells in a milk crate. Never going to roll around. Going to fit right on the pallet. I would love to have more scale of like, I'm kind of looking at buying what volume I have to buy enough coolers such that we could have one standard cooler for every one of our producers. That's always a nuisance of working with 8 different brands of tents and 8 different brands of coolers and everything. I don't know. I'm buying dry goods at a consolidated price, so people pay less for paper towels and gloves and all that stuff too. I don't know. I'm interested. Right now I said like I want to grow I would love to do more wholesale delivery for all of these producers. There is kind of, I think, a niche that we could serve because these are green market or farmers market producers are kind of smaller than specialty food. And they're ones who kind of haven't already built distributor relationships or something, or maybe don't even produce reliably consistently enough to be able to do that. But if we can be the person to translate that would be pretty cool, I think.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm kind of trying to see what's scalable, but at the same time, I'm okay with just doing what we do well.
Sometimes if you try to scale and it's too much, it causes more problems. So that wasn't a self-serving question either. Like, started in California, but I'm just curious. Well, I feel like we could ask you a million more questions, but we do
got a time limit.
Wrap it up. Yes, just a little bit. But I hope we see you at the conference in 2025 if you're able to make it.
Yeah.
And keep the conversation going. And I'll definitely be keeping an eye on what you're doing with 10 by 10. And this has been such a fascinating conversation. I'd love to hear feedback from other managers and farmers and vendors as well, just because I had never really heard of this kind of idea of anybody executing it. And so I'm curious about conversation about that. It's awesome.
Yeah, if you're doing something similar, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, it's unusual to find an actual new idea. Most ideas are stolen or modified or whatever, but this is kind of a new idea.
Yeah.
Good job, Peter.
Good job.
Thanks a lot. Well, thanks for having me on, Bridget and Kat. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. Good talking to you.
All right, Peter. Thanks for being on. We'll see you later.
All right, cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening today, and big thanks to Farmers Market University for helping market managers hone and verify their professional skills, and for supporting Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast. Learn more and save on the 2025 Farmers Market Certification course by clicking the Farmers Market University logo on the resource page at farmersmarketpros.com.
Please leave us a review on your podcast app or wherever you listen to Tent Talk. Let us and others know how you're enjoying the podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode of Tent Talk. Connect with fellow Farmers Market folks in our private Facebook group, the Farmers Market Pros Community, and follow us on Instagram at Farmers Market Pros. Find online education and other resources at farmersmarketpros.com. Tent Talk is brought to you by Farmers Market Pros, where passion meets profit. Tent Talk is hosted by Kat Fields White and Bridget Myers and produced by Leandra Hayes, with original music by David Mead. Tune in next week for another great episode.